Hi everyone, this is Coach Jorge, head coach at E3 Triathlon Coaching. On the following video, I'm gonna teach you how you can successfully execute your run at your next Ironman so you can achieve that next PR, you can finish your first Ironman, or even get that magic qualification that you've been chasing for seasons so you can get to the World Championship. I hope you enjoy it. First, let's get the obvious out of the way. You need to do the proper training. This includes the adequate volume and intensity based on your specific needs, goals, and limitations. And this, of course, includes the proper swim and cycling training. Why? Because the less fitness you have for these two, the more it's going to affect your run. Think of it as this way. If you have an energy budget for the entire race, the less fitness you have on swimming and cycling, your more energy is going to be used and the less is going to be available for running. Also, cycling fitness in particular is very important for a proper running performance. And of course, you need to do the run training, in particular, your long specific runs. Why? Because through these runs, you're going to build fatigue resistance that is going to allow you to have a better performance. Ironman racing is not necessarily to see who can run the fastest, quote unquote. What we're really thinking about is that by the time you get to the run, you're going to be on a heavily fatigued and depleted state, and at that time is who can slow down the least or at all over the last 10 miles of the run. Also, these long runs are going to help you to dial in into your proper fueling plan. This includes your hydration, your carbohydrates, etc. By testing different things on different runs, you'll be able to determine what's going to fulfill your needs. And also, these runs is going to give you the opportunity to dial in into your Ironman pace. This is very important because many people get to a race and they might not necessarily know what effort they should be striving for, or they don't have a strategy in place. There's three ways that you can approach the Ironman run in types of pacing. You can do it by perceived exertion, you can do them by a particular pace, or you can do them using other tools like a heart rate monitor to help you monitor your intensity. Using any of these three strategies can produce a great Ironman run. However, at E3 we believe that using a combination of all of them can produce even better results. And why is that? Because unless you are a very experienced athlete, that you have properly developed the proper feel for a particular race, you may struggle a little bit, especially at the beginning of the run, to really telling what should be the proper perceived exertion or pace that you should sustain after you already swim 2.4 miles, you bike 112 miles, and you're already on a fatigue state, depleted state, or you're being exposed to the elements and the race conditions. For instance, only using feel at the beginning of an Ironman run may be a little bit tricky, as your feel may be a bit skew. You just finished the bike, you're excited, there's a lot of people around, you're still feeling somewhat fresh because you're just really starting the run, and your feel may be a little bit thrown off. We have a saying at E3 that everybody feels awesome for the first 5 to 10 miles, but the race doesn't really start until the last 8 to 10 miles. So you have to be prepared for that. Going by pace only can also be tricky because, again, you might be used to your Ironman pace that you're being able to sustain in training when you're somewhat rested or not as fatigued, when you're properly fueled, when you're not exposed to crazy weather like you may face on race day. Therefore, your usual Ironman pace on race day after swimming and biking may be different than the one that you actually should be able to sustain in earlier portions of the run, so you can actually have a good run in later stages. And heart rate can also be a little bit tricky if not used properly, because heart rate is an indirect measure of work that can be affected by non-direct work variables like dehydration, fueling, heat exposure, electrolyte balance, etc. And these can affect or result in what's known as cardiac drift. This drift is the increase of the heart rate during a prolonged endurance effort that it will happen whether there's little or no change in your intensity. So if you keep running at a particular pace, your heart rate may continue to increase in spite of that consistent pace. However, if you do the proper training, one of the benefits is that we induce different adaptations on the cardiovascular system, and therefore, even though that cardiac drift may also be existent even during a race, the recurrence may become a little bit lesser because you're a little bit fitter. And therefore, the cardiac drift will be more the result of variables affecting you during the race that should allow you to make better decisions earlier on the run. Things like dehydration, electrolyte loss, how the weather is affecting you, all these will have an impact, so then you can adjust accordingly. So, to develop a pacing strategy using perceived exertion, pace, and heart rate, it's relatively simple. In training, what you're going to do is you're going to do some field testing to determine your training zones. There are links on the description of this video that it will teach you how you can test for training and racing paces. So once you know that, then you're going to start doing your long runs and you're going to be wearing your heart rate monitor. And this what is going to help you to learn is what that pace feels and what's usually the heart rate that you're sustaining for those runs. And with this, you should roughly know for the race what should be your Ironman and heart rate pace. For instance, if you look back at all your different mid-distance and long runs and you see that your usual pace was anywhere between 8:30s and 9s and your heart rate was anywhere between 140 and 145 beats per minute. Therefore, your Ironman pace, given different conditions, because you probably did that training on different weather, etc., maybe when you were fatigued or a little depleted, it means that your pace should be anywhere between 8:30s to 9s and your heart rate should be anywhere between 140 to 145. So that will be your starting strategy going into the race. And with that, you can set up your racing plan. Depending on your level of experience or what are your specific goals, this is going to vary a little bit. But in general, you will use that pace and heart rate as a target in addition to how you feel to pace the first portion of the run. For less experienced athletes, you'll be using that for anywhere between 15 to 20 miles, and for more experienced athletes, will be anywhere between 10 to 15 miles. And your goal should be to stay at the slightly easier range of that pacing strategy. So going back to the example, if your pace is anywhere between 8:30s and 9s and your heart rate is anywhere between 140 and 145, then to begin the race, you would try to stay around the lower end of your heart rate, somewhere around 140 beats per minute, and make sure that while you're running, it feels like your Ironman pace. Lastly, the pace is going to be just a result of trying to sustain that heart rate at that feel. And if that happens to be 9s, you know you're on the ballpark. If it happens to be a little bit faster or a little bit slower, still you know is that you're in the ballpark. Just let the pace be, focus more on your heart rate and focus more on your feel. And you'll continue to sustain that perceived exertion, that heart rate and that pace for the duration of your plan. So for less experienced athletes, it's me 15 to 20 miles. For more experienced athletes, might be 10 to 15 miles. And if you do that, you will be running at the proper intensity given the race circumstances, included what you did for the swimming, what you did for the biking, pacing and fueling, and what's happening or how you're feeling earlier portion of the run. So you will be focusing on that. And later on the run, you're going to place a bigger emphasis on your perceived exertion and your pace, because by then your heart rate may be affected by that cardiac drift and may increase in spite of what pace you're sustaining. So focusing more on perceived exertion and pace will yield better results, giving you the ability to adjust based on the race conditions. Finally, of course, to have a good run, you have to have a good execution during the swim of the bike, which includes your pacing and your fueling. This will be addressed on other videos in which we'll specifically teach you how you can do that. But for now, of course, remember that proper swimming and biking execution will be key to deliver a great Ironman run. So in summary, in order to have a great Ironman run, you have to do the proper training. This includes doing the proper swim and bike training. It also includes proper long specific runs where you can determine your Ironman and heart rate pace, and also includes proper execution during the swim and bike, which relates to pacing and to fueling. Finally, you need to know your proper pacing so you can focus more earlier on the run on a perceived exertion and heart rate, and later on the run on your perceived exertion and pace. If you do that, you will have a great Ironman run, and for a change, you may be racing the last portion of the marathon versus merely surviving it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like or leave any comments. We'll be happy to answer any questions or leave suggestions for future videos. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media, and remember, train smart.